So Neville Goddard was a renowned teacher of metaphysical concepts and someone that I've read a lot about and studied a lot on. He believed that the imagination was not just a tool for creating mental pictures, but the imagination was the essence of who we actually are. He believed that the imagination was the God power in us, God Himself in us. He believed that this was the divine creative force for what we call reality. So the Goddard imagination is the creative power of what he referred to as the inner man, as opposed to the outward man, this tangible, touching, see, smell, taste reality man. This was the true self that exists behind this physical body. He famously would say that imagination is the only redemptive power in the universe, suggesting that through our ability to imagine, we can shape and we can transform our own lives. And I subscribe to that. I really do believe that. And that is really the essence of what I want to talk to you about today. Uh, how do you abandon reasoning to get to what you want in your life, to affect the type of change that you want to affect? Well, let's talk about the power of the inner man. Goddard's concept about the inner man refers to a spiritual yet eternal aspect of ourselves, the only true self, which holds the power to create our external world through imagination. The inner man refers to the spiritual, the eternal aspect of ourselves, which holds the power to create our external world through imagination. That's who he believed that we are. If you think about that, really think about that, what has been created that hasn't first been imagined? What has been created that hasn't first been imagined? The house that I'm sitting in, the studio I'm in, this microphone that's in front of me, the camera that's recording me, the lights that are on me, all of these things were first a thought, an imagination in someone's mind, some sort of thought. So the inner man is the source of our thoughts, the source of our desires, and ultimately the source of our beliefs. Is here within the realm of imagination where true creation actually happens. So whatever it is you're trying to create in your life, whatever it is that you want, it happens first on the spiritual level. The inner man brings it to be first. This inner man is not confined to any limitation. So you think about your imagination, you're not confined. You're not confined to limits of resources and time and space and reality. You are, which is what we call it, you're in an imaginary space. So anything really goes. So you're not confined by limitations of the physical world. It actually transcends time, space, and even logic, which is what we're going to talk about today. It transcends logic. So what we imagine in the internal world, if we hold it to the point of a conviction, to a commitment, and to a belief, it will eventually manifest itself in the external world. That's how creation happens. That's how everything you have, you've gotten. That's how every single thing happens. That is the process of creation. So according to Goddard, everything that we experience on the outward was first created inwardly. So it was the inward man. It was the power of the inward man that brought this to be. So in order to change your outward circumstances of your life, you first have to change the inner world, because it's the inner man that really has the power, that is really creating and governing all of this thing. And how is he doing it? By imagination. So previously we talked about the power of your thoughts, where we compared panic attacks to these delightful daydreams. But we said, in essence, they're really all just thoughts, but they're very different thoughts, very different effects. Let's talk about the outer man, the inner man versus the outer man. So Goddard draws a clear distinction between these two. The inner man, which is the imaginative, creative self. And then there was the outer man, that physical, material, see, smell, taste, body man. The outer man is subject to limitations, of course, because we're in a physical world. It's driven by your five senses, facts and logic. And this can also bring about doubts because you are limited. The outer man reacts to external circumstances, believing that only certain things are tangible or possible because he refers to logic. On the other hand, it's the inner man who is boundless, limitless, residing in the realm of imagination where anything is possible. The inner man operates on the belief that imagination creates reality. As opposed to logic and reason and rationale in the material world, the inner man is not held to any of these standards. The inner man can imagine anything he or she wants. So while the outer man sees obstacles, the inner man sees endless possibilities. Endless possibilities. So Goddard taught that we must identify more with the inner man, that part of ourselves that uses imagination to create and create through belief rather than be confined to your physical world's limitation. Unfortunately for us, we're taught the opposite. Many times kids are told to, that's not possible, or, you need to be realistic. Think about how you used to think when you were a kid. Think about the limitless possibilities and how you would use your imagination when you were a kid versus now. It's almost painful now, depending on the age or stage of life that you're in. It's almost painful now to imagine. Why? Because so much time has gone by and so much of what you wanted, perhaps, so much of what you dreamed about seems to be held up or not possible. And so you don't even want to imagine it. You'd rather not think about it because it hurts too much. Maybe you had a dream of being a certain weight or being in a certain type of relationship, or your relationship didn't last, or, some sort of corporate advancement that never happened, or some sort of entrepreneurship, some sort of business, some sort of life goal that for some reason you have yet to achieve. And you've decided that it is unachievable based on logic. You've decided not to imagine it anymore because it hasn't happened before. And so to prevent yourself from being disappointed, hurt, you just decided to push that dream, that imagination to the side. The power of imagination in creation. So in Goddard's view, the outer man is only a reflection of the inner man. The outer man is a reflection of the inner man. So let me give you an example. I give this example all the time. It's very clear, especially if you've been in a car like this. So have you ever been in someone's car and it is pristine? I mean, seats are shiny, leather, they've been freshly wiped off. He or she doesn't have to move anything out of the seat in order for you to get in and sit down. The car smells good, cranks up, it's fine. The AC smells fresh, all of that. As opposed to you get into a car and there's stuff all on the dash. Wait a minute, I got to move all this stuff out of the seat. And there's cracks in the leather and there's dust and there's dirt all in the driver's panel. There's a lot going on in the car. Those are two different people that you're riding with. The outward man is a reflection of the inner man. I've never gotten into someone's car that was completely junky and they were some, straight-laced, very clean individual. Usually what you see on the outside is what has been manifesting on the inside. It's a representation of what's going on in their mind. No different when you see hoarders and you go to people's houses and stuff is everywhere. That is just a representation of what's going on in their mind. And just like when you walk in someone's office, everything is so neatly in place. You'll walk into somebody's house and it's like a museum, like there's not even the dogs are laying in a certain area, like nothing's out of place. That's what's going on in their mind. The outer represents the inner. So that is to say, if the outer man sees lack or failure, it believes this is the truth of existence. Why? Because it sees it. But the inner man, through focused imagination, can see abundance and success. And by holding that belief, the outer reality will eventually confirm and conform to that inner vision, that imagination. So Goddard used to emphasize that imagination is a spiritual act. And that's the thing I want you to think about today. This is the thought. If we're going to rethink, let's think about this in a different way. Imagination is a spiritual act. And what we can imagine with feeling and conviction, it can become reality for us in our outer worlds. Even if you're beyond a certain age and you're in that category I described before where you've decided it's too painful to even think about it anymore, you can still do it. But let's do it differently. God urges us to live by the guidance of the inner man, imagining the reality that we wish to experience even before it is visible to the outer man. Now, the thing that you don't have to do, and this is, again, not part of our training, the thing that you don't have to do is create the scenarios for how these things will happen. And again, this is not part of our training, which makes it difficult. So this is why you listen to a podcast like this, because I want to challenge how you perceive this and how you develop a different mechanism for thinking this through the next time. So number one, we've been programmed. We pay more attention to the external than the internal. So that's number one. Number two, we're taught, logic, rationale, and things like that, which limit our imagination. And then number three, we are told, to plan and to work these things out. You've got to have you got to have your checklist. You got to know A to B, B to C, and so forth. And what Goddard is saying, and so many metaphysical teachers, including the great Carpenter, has said, is that really consider now the things that you want, consider them as if they're done, or speak those things that are not as though they are, or, whatsoever things you desire. When you pray, believe that you have them. All of that defies logic. All of that defies rationale. All of that sounds to me like imagination. So why have we been taught to do the opposite? So Goddard, again, in summary, he says imagination is not just a mental exercise. And that's why I stressed to you earlier that you must see now imagination as a spiritual practice. You must see imagination as a creative tool. You must see imagination as that God force that is actually in you. So instead of being outside of you, it is, he is, she is within you. So imagination is not just a mental exercise. It is a divine power within each of us. It is a divine power within each of us. So as you are rethinking your methodology on your life and how you will imagine it moving forward, these are some key, definitions to have. Imagination is not only a creative power, but it is a divine power. Imagination is a creative, divine, godlike power that resides inside of all of us. So the inner man, our imaginative self, is the true creator of our reality. Our inner man is the true creator of our reality, while the outer man is merely the reflection of that inner man, of that imagined state, of that believed state. So by tapping into the power of the inner man, you're able to transcend limitations, i.e. logic and rationale, and you can shape your reality and align it to really what you want it to be. So what do we talk about here a lot on the podcast? We talk about your relationships. We talk about your personal self, be it your health, your mental health, etc. We talk about your career path, and we talk about your entrepreneurship, your ability to be able to go into business for yourself. So whatever it is that you have a desire for, and we all have desires for something, How are you imagining that state to be? How are you using your imagination? So if you look at the thumbnail coming in, we really put you in the mindset of saying, okay, um, how does reasoning limit my ability to manifest what I want? How does reasoning and logic limit me in terms of my imagination? So you've got two things. You've got imagination on one side and you've got reason and logic on the other. And if you are going to subscribe to the idea of logic and rationale, you don't have a lot of room for imagination, i.e., the system that we're currently in. Or you can change the way that you think about this and create a new path for yourself of creation and be outside of logic and outside of reason, which I know sounds scary to you, even just saying it. But by utilizing your imagination, but seeing it as a spiritual practice, seeing it as that godlike force that resides inside of you and your ability, your actual birthright as a creator to use this power to develop and align and live the life that you desire, the actual life that you desire. If you just think about where you are, and you think about how you got there, which was it? Was it logic and rationale or was it imagination? How reasoning limits your ability to manifest or believe in your imagination and how that can affect your quality of life. Here's the opportunity. This is why I believe reasoning can hold you back. Reason is very useful. You know, if you're trying to determine, is it safe for me to cross the street? Or can I jump from this height? Or should I, sit on this bench or whatever that you have to use your logical mind for. So it is helpful. But when it comes to manifestation and the creation and the development of your life, it can limit you because you will see so many things as impossible. Why? Well, let's think about what your brain does. Your brain is a problem solving machine. And the first thing your brain does, it discerns whether have we seen this done before? To give a yes or no to is this possible at all? So if your brain, if you haven't seen this done before, the chances are you're going to think something is what we call impossible. You're not going to believe that it is possible. So if it's something that you want to do, but you've never seen it done, there's a good chance that you may not be able to do it because you limit yourself through reason and rationale. Which is why, if you mentor kids like I do, you know that the number one, well, I don't say number one, but I would say the top three things kids need to have in their life is exposure. They need to be exposed to people who have accomplished the things that they want to accomplish. Why? Because if they see other people doing it, they know that they can do it. No different than how they learn their language, how they learn to walk, how they learn to problem solve. But when you have so many kids in certain areas of the country, of the world, that are not exposed to certain types of behaviors, certain types of accomplishments, it limits them in terms of what they believe for themselves because they've never seen it done. So they will think it is impossible. Not possible, but impossible. Okay? So reasoning can hold you back. Why? Because it is the opposite of your imagination. The opportunity here is to recognize when reasoning serves you and when it does not. I'm not suggesting that you all of a sudden just close your eyes and cross the street. I'm not suggesting that you just set out on faith when you know your gas hand says you're completely on empty. I suggest you go to the gas station. But what I am suggesting you do is use your imagination when you're in your quiet time, your meditation, your mindfulness practice. Use your imagination. It's more of a guidance, more of a tool, a spiritual tool to create the things that you want to see manifest in your life, in your business, in your career, in your health, in your physical body, in your relationships, and believe it into existence. So, over reliance on logic. If you're overly focused on logic, you may dismiss your dreams or your desires as unrealistic. And God forbid, if you share them with someone, they certainly may tell you that's unrealistic. I don't want you to be disappointed. So I would suggest maybe you kind of take that down a little bit. I don't want to see you, be disappointed when that doesn't happen. So maybe instead of going for this type of promotion, you should go for this type of promotion. Your skill set really matches this, smaller category. Or, that's very ambitious. Why don't you start off with a smaller salon? Why would you open such a big store? Why would you go for such a big project and this is your first one? In other words, people tend to use their logic and their rationale to limit exposure and liability and disappointment, all of these things, which is fine, unless, of course, you're trying to create something that's never been done. So, your imagination. If you can use your logic for things that is needed for, but also respect and understand the purpose of your imagination. That is really the whole point of what we're talking about today. So let's start trusting our imagination and let's go for faith and belief over logic. The best solution to overcoming limiting reasoning and logic and rationale is to cultivate a faith over your imagination and your desires. Cultivate faith in your imagination and your desires, even when they seem illogical and even when they seem far-fetched, just like when you were a kid. Just like when you were a kid. So manifestation thrives on the belief of the unseen. And I can't even name a holy text or scripture that doesn't support this. Speak those things that are not as though they are. Whatsoever things you desire when you pray, believe now. So when you say whatsoever things, that's really anything you can think of, right? Anything you can think of. But the issue is when I say that, there's so many people who will say, you know what, that's just wishful thinking. It's that magical thinking. This is what Steve Jobs was accused of, magical thinking. And people are very cynical because so much has not happened for them. They don't really, quite honestly, want to see it happen for you because it puts more pressure on them also, but they just don't think it can happen. So I've got a little advice for you. Don't share your dreams with anyone. It's not going to keep you from imagining what you want for yourself, though. Tell them about it when it happens. That way it doesn't diminish the enthusiasm that you have for your own dream. I think about a kid that is lost in imagination and wants to see these wonderful things appear in his or her life. And then I think about an adult telling them that it's not possible or that it's not rational or not reasonable and that they're out of touch with reality. Well, good, because a lot of times the reality that we're in touch with is not awesome at all. At all, because there are too many adults that have lost connectivity with that spiritual part of themselves, their imagination. So here's the deal, the solution. Let's cultivate faith in our imagination. Just like what we talked about with the panic attacks, if we can put so much energy and so much emotion into scaring ourselves into a panic attack, why can't we put the same amount of energy, the same amount of focus and attention and emotion into pleasing ourselves? It is possible. I realize so many people don't think so because you don't see it, but it is absolutely the same technique. If you take the same technique you use to begin a panic attack and use it to get yourself into a delightful daydream, it is the same energy. It's the same thought or the same process because it's your thoughts. So when you catch yourself dismissing a desire because it doesn't make sense or seemingly unlikely, stop and ask yourself, what if it were possible? What if it were possible? So instead of letting logic rule, let your imagination run free. Visualize the outcome that you want to see already happening. This can shift and help you to shift your mind to be open to new possibilities, even if they don't seem practical yet. In other words, create the space for divinity. If your imagination is spiritual energy, if your imagination is a spiritual creative process, create the space for divine things to happen. The only thing I'll tell you is, one, Keep it to yourself. Don't share it with anyone that you don't really trust this type of information with. If you're not in the same conscious space, be protective of your energy. And number two, allow yourself the ability to just consider what can be without considering how to get it done. That really is where reasoning and logic come into effect. And that's what diminishes our dreams a lot of time. We don't see how this can be. We don't see how in less than a year's time we can become a millionaire. We don't see how in a certain amount of time we can get completely out of debt, or we can be married in a new home or have a baby. Whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish in your life, just see it being done, feel the energy around the completeness of that, and allow space for divinity to come in and do what it can do. Because I assure you, this road, this bridge of incidents, as Neville talked about, and as so many other metaphysical teachers have talked about, I assure you, the universe has a multitudinous ways to bring this into being that you're not conscious of in the slightest. In the slightest. So let the universe do what the universe does, and you do what you're supposed to do. You can use your imagination. Use your imagination. Well, guys, listen, thank you so much for being part of and watching this, today. If you haven't done so already, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Make sure that you continue to share, like, and subscribe, to our podcast, and especially on the YouTube side. If you've not done that already, please come over on YouTube and subscribe to us there. And I hope you got a lot out of us today. If you, like I always say, go back and listen to the podcast again, because there's so much information here, and I think you'll hear something different the second time. Thanks. We'll see you guys soon.